Buongiorno Benedetta, non è Shirin Neshate? Abbiamo con noi anche la co-curatrice della mostra dedicata a Shirin Neshat ed ecco
Sì,
qua. Eh, Hi
ok.
Shirin Neshat,
Hi. Hi everyone.
welcome here, welcome virtually here on our screen.
Yes,
Really thank you
I can
to,
see the audience, but I can hear them.
yeah, yeah, maybe you can see them from the back, from,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I'm calling Diego here, so he's
Hi
joining us
Diego.
here.
Must be very late.
So here we are. We stay
Hi,
on the
Shirin.
side so people
Hi.
can see you.
Yes.
So, after many years, we could see again your beautiful movie, and it still say many things to us and to our present, even maybe even more, because it's so actual. There are so many things that are still very uh, meaningful for our eyes. But I will leave to Diego the first question, and maybe I will do a second one, and then we will ask the people to ask their questions and say what they have to say, they want to say.
Hi, Shirin. Ciao,
Hi.
Benedetta.
Ciao, ciao, ciao Diego.
Ciao, Beatrice, scusami.
No,
Beatrice
tranquillo,
Benedetta.
è tardi. I know
Volevo,
it's late.
volevo specificare che Beatrice curerà insieme a me la mostra al PAC. Shirin, I introduced the movie before the screening, but now I'd like to ask you, how did you mix in the movie realism, magic realism, surrealism, uh, in this movie, in this work, and which was your original idea when did you decide to tell the story from the novel Women Without Men?
Yes, I have to explain that Woman Without Men is a very famous magic realist novel by Shahnusha Parsipur in Iran that most Iranian people have read. It was a very controversial book. She was imprisoned because of this book. Some of the subject the government found sacrilegious. And for me personally, as my first film, and as someone who is very interested in very conceptual and kind of dreamy work that I do in my artwork, Woman Without Men felt like it presented the perfect opportunity where you have a footing in realism, history, the struggle of a nation, and all of that material that was really deeply politically charged. Yet there was something very mystical, something very feminist, something very existential about the plight of these women who ultimately look to free themselves from patriarchy. Um, and the last thing I want to say, Diego, for me, there was always this poetic between how in this story and um, the country of Iran is almost like the fifth character. As the woman look from idea of freedom and independence, so is the country of Iran as it's looking for, you know, independence from foreign intervention. So there was that, and also you had the city of Iran, the city of Tehran, which is purely realism, but then the orchard, which really presented something that was utterly um, abstract and surrealistic and had no sense of time. So there was this very strange, interesting connection that I exaggerated in the film.
Non ho chiesto prima se c'è qualcuno che ha bisogno di traduzione.
Oh, shit, I
Se
didn't
avete
realize that.
bisogno faccio una sintesi, ma mi sembra che abbiate capito tutti. Va bene, allora andiamo avanti così, perfetto. Vai pure Diego.
Magari chiederei anche a Beatrice, se è in visto che si è collegata, ha avuto questa occasione, se hai da fare qualche domanda anche tu a Shirin, oppure...
Certo. Beh, sì, I'm always very curious about the work by Shirin Neshate. As an art historian, I'm very curious about the reference, the precise references that you used. For instance, you cannot recognize when Zarin was found floating on the water. You can always think about the Tate Modern painting by Millet, the Ophelia, the character by Shakespeare. So it's quite the same sequence, it's quite the same, how can I say, image, you know, when the body of Zarin is floating in this river full of green vegetation. So, and you have also quoted something from El Greco's paintings, as you said in our talk at Park Museum. So, which are your references? Because I'm very curious when art comes from the great art from the past, new art, new great art.
I mean, obviously, being a visual artist, I paid a lot of attention to the metaphors that live in the image. And for example, if you think about Zarin also in the hammam, in the bathhouse, that was really, in some ways, it resembled the Orientalist paintings that you imagine that perfect Arabian, image of Islamic cultures, yet the woman was bleeding and she was anorexic. I think even with Sharmusha Parsipur, the garden, the orchard where the woman took refuge, was a reference to the Garden of Eden, and it came from the analogy of and the gardener being, very much a kind of an angelic figure. So I think, and also each woman's character, in some ways, their nature was quite symbolic. So I think symbolism was an element that worked both very big for Sharmusha Parsipur in the writing, and then I took that and sort of took it to the next level. And I wanted to say the idea of the flight of Munes, whether in fact that was a suicide or an idea of freedom, or like you said, the image Ophelia, or Ophel, Zarin floating, and so I think that a lot of these images for me have existed from my education in Western art history, and I've always used to paint woman flying, woman floating in water, and then there I make a movie. Those are the images that show up in the film.
So, as an Iranian artist living abroad, you have always been very attentive to not just the general political situation of Iran, but particularly of women in Iran. And this movie is really around the figure of these 4 women going through violence and then trying to find a new path, a new life, and a new beauty, and contact with themselves, also through nature, I think, through research of roots and purification. Many layers, many things that are symbolized in the movie. And now that many things have happened recently in Iran, just around women and their role in that society, the movie seems to speak very loudly to us. What have you thought about this history of women in Iran that continues to go back to similar problems?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. If some of my friends in the audience know my work, everything I've done, whether photography or video or film, has focused on the subject of women, and particularly Iranian women, because I'm deeply inspired by how far against the wall the women of Iran have been consistently throughout history, generation after generation, yet how resilient and rebellious they are. And so that's how I have always depicted my work, in a way that representing oppression and the pressure of tradition, religion, and politics on the woman. But the women have consistently fought back, and they've been very powerful, very strong. And I think it's no surprise with Women Life Freedom last year. We had very much a repetition of a revolution by women who revolted against discrimination and unjust. And I think in Women Without Men movie, you have 4 women who basically take their lives and their destiny in their own hand, without really knowing the clarity of what is the future. But what is clear is their sense of rebellion, the courage. And if some of you know my video Rapture, where the woman went on the boat and escaped, or whether they were committing suicide or reaching freedom, or Turbulence, where the woman sang and broke all the rules of the music. So in general, the women turned their back to the society, to the men, to the government, to the religion, to the systems, and try to reestablish their own society in a way. That's what I think is beautiful about this novel, that they create their own sanctuary where the law of the outside does not rule there. It does not apply. But then once they break the rule of that society, then things crumble. So there's so many metaphors and symbolism here that I thought it was just so indicative of the strength of Iranian women that I just fell in love with the novel.
Thank you. I will ask people if they have their questions, or comment or anything. Se avete qualche domanda, commento, qualcosa da chiedere a Shirin Neshate, approfittate, alzate la mano e vi porto il microfono. Non siate timide, non siate timidi.
Che se no dovete aspettare un anno.
Sì.
Stavolta la mostra.
Prego.
I want to ask a question about your women's role in the recent political movement, because in your film we see 4 women, 3 of them find a new life in the nature and in the beauty, and the 4th one, she joins the communist guys, which were very traditional communists, and the opposition was led by these men. And now, in the recent movement, they are the women who led the movement. And they said, women, life, freedom. And something happened. Something very important happened in the meantime, I think. Because before, the opposition was the Communist Party. And now, the women are the leaders. What happened? How do you explain it?
This is a film that takes in 1953, and the book was written about the time when we had the coup d'etat by the CIA, and basically the democratically elected Prime Minister, Dr. Mossadegh's government, was overthrown with the help of the British and the CIA, and because of the threat of communism. So this is a historic fact. This is not about today. This is actually a very rare film that captures Iran in 1953. There aren't so many films that have tried to capture that moment of Iranian history. So it's not really possible to compare what is happening today in Iran with the narrative that you just watched, because this is about 1953. For me, it was the significance was how this woman, Munez, wanted to be a political activist, but because she was a woman, her brother wouldn't allow her. And so only in death and the resurrection, she was able to participate like with the men. You know, of course, this is a allegorical, this is a surrealistic magic realism, so it's not possible, but it is more symbolic of the group of women who like to also be politically active like they are today. But this is about 1953. But what is important to point out is that she had this conviction because she thought that the communists and all these people who were fighting for their nation, the nationalists, were ultimately the good guys, and they were doing the good move for their country. But once violence came into the picture, and she witnessed the same man that she had been listening to his rhetoric is capable of killing, and that terrified her, and realized that politics is ultimately is an ugly business, and it's a very difficult to be engaged in politics without its encounter with violence. And that was the meaning that we were trying to incorporate into her journey. But again, this film, it's about 1953, so it has to be seen in the context of the 1953 coup, which is mostly forgotten in the West.
Yes, I think it's still very useful to see this movie to remember what happened in Iran in those years, because we tend to forget. Anybody else questions, comment, or curiosities? We wait for the exhibition. Diego, qualche?
I have another question, Shirin. Before the screening, we discussed about the political body. In your opinion, which are the differences between art and activism, between artist and activist, and what the art really can do to help us to survive in this reality?
Very good point, Diego. It's very simple for me. I think that activism is a practice that you can distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong. And you can really actively fight the evil, as you would say. But art is something that you, as the artist, cannot distinguish for others what is good and evil, what is good and bad. The people themselves have to draw that interpretation, their own interpretation. So I think for me, although I obviously have my own opinions and my whole life has been very politically impacted, so I do have different sides, but my work has never been a place where I want to dictate to others who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, what ideology, what philosophy is right and what is not. And I think that that to me it's a propaganda. If an artist tries to infuse or project their own point of view to the audience, then there is no enigma, because you're preaching to the converter most of the times. So I hope art is a platform to create a dialogue, really a conversation. And I think, especially in time of political crisis like today, art plays a great, great role, but it should not be preaching. It should not be telling people how to think, what to think.
Beatrice, hai qualche altra curiosità o commento?
Grazie. Well, I have read, Shirin, about this question that Diego has done, that you and your collaboration coming back in 2009 when you won the Silver Lion for this beautiful movie at the Venice Biennale as the 66th, I guess, edition. You were wearing in green in support of the Iranian Green Movement. So what has changed in these past 15 years? And we can say that now is the right moment, maybe because women and men are connected into this new revolution. How do you think about young people? They are very courageous, very brave. How do you think after
it's a good question, Beatrice. First of all, the film was released in 2009, exactly during the Green Movement, when the whole country of Iran was going through this upheaval, and there was massive protests against the government, a fraud election, and the color green became like a symbol, and so all of us wore green. The point is that I myself have been very active at times. I've participated in hunger strikes or organizing certain events in support and solidarity with the Iranian young uprising people in Iran. But what I was saying, that in my work, I try to not infuse or build my own point of view in the work itself. But I find that, as you know, most of the Iranian cultural activists, like artists, visual artists, filmmakers, writers, have been extremely vocal during the Women Life Freedom. In fact, it's shocking to see what a role artists played in this revolution inside and outside of Iran. So many filmmakers were arrested, actresses, a lot of musicians, visual artists, writers, and then on the outside, how many of us were vocal and very, very active, because it was widely understood that if you have an audience, or if you have an ability to echo their resistance and their fight, it would so benefit them. So we all did that. So that is as far as I've gone in terms of activism, where just to show my support, at time of crisis. But it's tedious. And the last thing I wanted to say, because these days, what is going on in the Middle East, Gaza and Israel and Hamas and Netanyahu, all of that, it's really very difficult because for the artist or for any creative individuals to know how to indulge in being a voice, because it's so polarized, and it's the religions of Islam and Judaism, but it's also the country of Iran, Israel, Palestine, and it's terrifying. So I think this is a very different time where you just don't want to insult, don't want to disrespect, but nevertheless, I think the artists are always, I think, on the right side of and trying to call for humanity, for peace, for being the voice of those who don't have a voice.
Thank you.
Well, there is a question here.
Hello. I was just wondering, where was the movie shot? Was it in Iran or somewhere else?
Yeah, thank you for this question. We shot in Morocco, mainly in Casablanca, where it didn't look anything like Tehran in 1950s, but we were able to, we had a very small budget to really recreate Iran, in the best we could, and we were able to get the support from the European, the French, German, Austrian support to create Iran in Morocco. And so it was an incredibly international effort. It took us 6 years to make this film, from inception to its release. But we really, although we could never do a good job in being very precise about recreating Iran in that historical manner, we really tried to do our best within our very modest budget. But what I could tell you, it was a labor of love.
Thank you. So we are looking forward to seeing your exhibition here in Milan. We still have to wait for some months, right, Diego? But we are sure that it will be beautiful.
Thank you, and thanks to all the audience and all the organizers to bring this film back to Milan. This is in Milan, right?
Yes, we are in Milan. Yes. So we hope you will come also here to Cinema Beltrade next time during the exhibition. So. Maybe we can organize something else here on our screen, and we really invite you to come and. Also with
I think I've made 2 other films, so it would be nice at some point to be able to share with the audience as a visual artist how I've been experimenting.
Of course. We also like to mix cinema and art here on the screen sometimes, so we can do some experiments in that occasion. And
it'd be lovely.
So thank you also to Beatrice. Naturalmente invitiamo anche Beatrice.
Thank you, Beatrice. And thank you all for spending such a late night with me in the cinema and for watching the film.
Thank you very much. The movie is beautiful, and it's always a pleasure to see it again.
Thank you so much.
Bye Shirin.
Bye.
Bye Diego. Bye Beatrice.
Bye Shirin. Bye Diego. Ciao. Goodbye Monica. Bye.
Grazie Beatrice. Allora, ci vediamo. Grazie a tutti. E vi ricordo allora, se vi va, per il terzo appuntamento di questo ciclo, che sarà appunto il film Orlando di Sally Potter, un altro bellissimo film che ripeschiamo dal passato e che preannuncia un pochino anche l'uscita dell'Orlando di Preciado, che sarà prossimamente, e conclude appunto questi sguardi paralleli. Grazie ancora a tutti, buonanotte, buon cinema e buon teatro a tutti.
Buonanotte.